There's not really like one specific, this is it. You're doing the functional movement right now. Like your best position is your next position. And when you get stuck in a position, particularly one that's putting a lot of pressure on the cervical spine or the lumbar spine, or kind of putting your diaphragm in a disadvantageous position to be able to get access to full respiration, and then you sit yourself in that position for an extended period of time, then your body starts to kind of become almost like stuck in that position. And then you start to feel almost imprisoned inside of your body, and you want to express, and you want to move, and you want to dance, and you want to play with your kids, but you just feel kind of old, and you start to feel kind of like gunky and stuck and dehydrated. And that is the beginning of aging.
Aaron Alexander is a pioneering manual therapist and movement coach, podcast host, author, and creator of the Align Method. Aaron has over 2 decades of professional coaching experience, whose clients range from A-list Hollywood celebrities to professional athletes and everyone in between. With his vast knowledge and experience, Aaron has grown on to interview over 400 of the world's preeminent thought leaders on physical and psychological well-being on the top-rated Align podcast. Through trial, error, and the opportunity to commune with the world's foremost experts, Aaron has distilled what he has found to be the bedrock of human health into the Align Method. Welcome, Aaron. It's so nice to have you on Take Back Your Health with Dr. Amy Myers. Welcome back to Take Back Your Health with Dr. Amy Myers. Today's guest is Aaron Alexander. I'm very excited to have you here. We're just talking about our connection, that he's in Austin, and normally I am often in Austin, but currently sitting in Santa Fe. So sorry we can't meet in person, but I'm so happy that you're here with us today.
Yeah, it's so beautiful to get to connect with you.
All right. Well, so we are going to be talking about the Align Method, which is really about movement and well-being. We were talking about some mutual contacts that we have in the movement and movement field. And you are a trainer, a coach, a movement guru. So can we sort of start with your story and how you got into this?
Lots of insecurity. Obsession with like bodybuilding and acting on a defense mechanism to mask feelings of, not feeling worthy or enough, for like, all of that as a little guy. Slightly like unstable home situation, not completely, but like dad got into some things. And I think that created a ripple into me to protect. And the way that I protected is through protecting my physiology. And so I got obsessed with eating as much protein and creatine and all the different eatings as possible, and just obsessing over bodybuilding in all of the wrong ways. I think it's a very common like trope for a lot of young men. And then that led to a lot of dissolution, a lot of chronic pain, a lot of like pretty significant injuries. And then henceforth beyond that was the process of putting all the parts back together. So then studied a thing called Rolfing, or structural integration, which some people might know what that is, some people might not. We could talk about it.
Yeah, sure.
And that's a big part of like integrating the structure, putting the pieces back together, remembering the body. And so that began that process of putting things back together, and then pursuing different movement and training modalities that were more about integration and connection, and more like moving like a human, and to create more ease in the body. And then also something I think is really interesting that you probably align with is the relationship between the internal world and the external manifestation of the body, so that our body kind of holds and expresses feelings and sensations and emotions and things of the sort. So it's kind of been like that type of journey of deepening into the body over the last 20 years or so.
And so were you trained, in bodybuilding, or that was just something that you had an interest in? And then as you got injured, were you, then seeking these different modalities to sort of, put yourself back together?
Yeah. So I got really obsessive with the bodybuilding around like age 15 or so, and put on like 60 plus pounds in a span of like, it was like a year or something of that sort. And then I got a lot of praise for that. And then started to lean on that praise as like, that was my currency. Like that was my self-worth in the world. And, I had trainers and things of the sort, but really it was just like the traditional old school, like Muscle and Fitness and all the different games, magazines, and just doing all the things that I could to become as basic of a kind of simple bodybuilder, A to B movements, not really caring so much about like fluidity of movement or ease of movement. And yeah, that led to a lot of just chronic tensioning of the body. Before that, I was an athlete, and I progressively got worse at the athletic endeavors that I was getting into as I was packing on all this muscle. So I looked really impressive from the outside, but actually the way that I was expressing as an athlete was getting worse and worse. So now I work with different athletes of sorts. We were talking before about working with Aaron Rodgers last year, and kind of helping put his pieces back together to be able to move more efficiently. And it's very common among so many modern people. We move more unilaterally and more sagittally and more kind of like robots. And that creates a lot of friction in the body. And so now it's been, a long ongoing process of reducing friction in the body.
Well, let's talk about that, because I don't think that, a lot of people understand that. I mean, I at one point was going to what is termed a, functional movement or functional coach, where I was doing a lot of bear crawls and, different kinds of movements, and probably was the strongest I had ever been. But a lot of people look at us like, let's just go do weights, or let's even do machines. And so kind of, can you describe to us the difference between just maybe simple weightlifting to, and again, you might call it something else. I know you have the Align method, but maybe something that's broader that people might understand, such as functional movement, where people might be doing, deadlifts to bear crawls to crab crawls on the floor to keep this functional movement. Can you describe kind of the difference between those two things and what's happening in your body?
Functional movement, I would personally describe it as any movement that is putting all of the parts of the body together to be able to move in unicity to express whatever you're doing. So if you're picking something up off of the ground, that would be a very functional movement, obviously, but there would be a lot of ways to dysfunctionally do it. So as you're picking something up off of the ground, something that would be incredibly valuable for someone to understand would be understanding how to create proper intra-abdominal pressure in their midsection. And if you're able to do that, that is going to help to stabilize the lumbar spine and the thoracic spine and the diaphragm and the pelvic floor. And it's going to send a signal to your nervous system that you are safe to move. If your body feels unsafe to move because there's instability happening anywhere through the system, particularly the central nervous system, i.e. the spinal column, then everything you do will be degraded. And so the foundation for quote unquote, like, a bastardized kind of annoying word of like functional movement, because it can mean freaking anything. I would say a good cornerstone or footing for that would be starting off with prioritizing the axial skeleton or the spine. And a big part of that would be understanding breathing mechanics. And then from there, and then I'll shut up because there's more stuff we can talk about. You probably have more questions, but that would be just something simple for people to like grab onto, like, okay, interesting. Understand breath, understand stabilizing my midsection. And that's going to send a signal to my central nervous system and my whole entire autonomic nervous system, my whole body, all the systems, that I'm safe to move. Brilliant. That's really important. Next, from there, something that would be valuable that I think would kind of trend towards the quote unquote like functional movement realm would be like a human being. If you hang out with a child, children move functionally. So they crawl, they lay on their back, they lay on their side, they lay on their belly, they will squat, they will just do various different iterations of floor sitting throughout the day. If you give them a chair, they will use the chair, but they use it in like kind of weird swirly ways, and they'll hang off the back, and they don't see it the way that a kind of domesticated adult male or female sees a chair. And what they're doing with that is they're naturally starting to heal and tune and circulate their bodies, all the fluids throughout all of their connective tissue, all of their organs, their central nervous system, like all of the systems get tuned and circulated just through that natural movement that they're going to go through. And so there's not really like one specific, this is it. You're doing the functional movement right now. Like your best position is your next position. And when you get stuck in a position, particularly one that's putting a lot of pressure on the cervical spine or the lumbar spine, or kind of putting your diaphragm in a disadvantageous position to be able to get access to full respiration and then you sit yourself in that position for an extended period of time, then your body starts to kind of become almost like stuck in that position. And then you start to feel almost imprisoned inside of your body, and you want to express, and you want to move, and you want to dance, and you want to play with your kids, but you just feel kind of old, and you start to feel kind of like gunky and stuck and dehydrated. And that is the beginning of aging. And if you can unlock that throughout the system, then the body comes alive. And that's I would say, it sounds wanky and poetic, but it's like the fountain of youth. When you find a quote unquote older person that's still playful, still has access to that like child part within themselves, they're probably going to do childlike stuff. They're going to play ultimate frisbee. They're going to climb trees. They're going to slackline. They're going to go surf. They're going to they're going to dance. They take dance classes, and they kind of have this creative expression of the way that they move, and their body heals and it replenishes itself, and the nervous system is activated, and they're more creative and they're more open in relationships and connection, because that's the way that they express as an organism. I would say that is like a long roundabout kind of way of describing what I would consider like functional.
And it's very focused on that area. And so it's not all of this expansive, movement like you were talking about.
You can use a machine super functionally, and you can use a machine and create spaciousness and length to the entirety of all of your connective tissue systems if you follow basic fundamental principles. And that's what I created in the Align method, was taking these golden threads of principles that you'd get from dance or martial arts or Olympic weightlifting or powerlifting. There's consistent threads throughout all of that. That's like, okay, there's a few places and positions throughout the body to be able to pay attention to with consistency. And if you do that and you apply that into a seated preacher curl, which is the one where you have like the back of your triceps, arms on the bench, you're just doing like, isolated bicep curl. It seems pretty basic. There's a lot of value in any form of movement. There's value in that. But as you're doing that, one version of doing that, maybe you're flaring your ribs as you're doing that. So you're practicing a disadvantageous position to create stability in your midsection. Maybe you're breathing in such a way where you're kind of like holding your breath at the wrong time. So you're not able to actually access that intra-abdominal pressure and be able to create that bicep curl from your torso. If you can move from the trunk and also be actively driving down into the ground with your feet, you're connecting the whole entire system, and you become so much more powerful. So if you're just doing a basic bicep curl, just standing in place, doing a bicep curl, I can make any person at least 20% stronger doing a bicep curl in 10 seconds. If you allow me to quote unquote align their body, which is, I would say that whether that was my brain or not. But that's the other reason we call it Align. And so just by starting to reorganize some of those positions of the joints throughout the body, the feet, the knees, the pelvis, the spine, adding appropriate pressure to the midsection, understanding how to use your breath. From there, you send the signal to your body that you're strong, you're safe, you're stable. And then it's just like having a kid, which I don't have any kids, but it sounds like you have kids. You have kids?
I have a 7-year-old daughter, yeah.
If your daughter feels safe with you and your husband or partner or whatever, then she will be more likely, and please correct me on this because I'm not a father. I have a dog though. She will be more likely to wander further out beyond the yard and beyond it. She'll be more personable with other people because she knows she has a safe anchor to come back to.
When she was born, I have a friend who has a son 2 days younger than my daughter, and we'd both they'd walk into the same party, and he would be, hanging tight, and she would be, bolting to the other room by herself, playing with, children 5 years older than her. So,
right. So that would be an indication that she feels well adjusted and safe in her anchor position, which is her home with her mother and her father and her home.
Yeah.
And so her nervous system, now this is an outward manifestation expressing of her nervous system in her personality, goes and says, oh man, I feel safe. I can walk around with my shoulders back. I can breathe normally. I have access to full exhalation. I'm kind of riding this beautiful HRV balance where I'm like my rhythms in my heart are responding to my environment in an appropriate way. I feel safe. Coming back because she feels anchored. Mm-hmm. She's expressing as a nervous system the same way that your nervous system and her nervous system and every nervous system expresses when they feel safe within themselves. One of the main ways to feel safe within yourself and confident within yourself is to align your frequent body.
you have definitely alluded to a lot of this. So why don't we walk through the principles of the Align method and how does someone align their body so that it feels safe during these workouts to be able to get more out of their workouts?
So the first thing would be, paying attention to your breath, and something that would be really simple for somebody to start. There's been lots of different books about nose breathing and the value of breathing through your nose. And there's also value in breathing through your mouth as well. It's just something that would be used as like my buddy, Brian McKenzie, he had done lots of podcasts with, and he helped with the revision of the breathing chapter in my book. He refers to mouth breathing as like fourth and fifth gear of breathing, where you're maxed out, you're up at the top of some big mountain, you're sprinting as fast as you can, and you're kind of like, okay, this is fifth gear. You don't want to stay in fifth gear. You want to get yourself back into like second, third gear range, where you're primarily utilizing your nose for breathing, because your nose engages with 30 plus functions in respiration. Your mouth is structured for eating. So you're missing out on so much beautiful filtration and the addition of nitric oxide and humidification and all these different aspects that your nose is so beautiful in the way that it's actually, like, the technology of the nose is so brilliant. And so if we're bypassing that, that's a big problem. It's also helpful with
just real quick. I tape my mouth at night. I have for years. Is that something you recommend, like during a workout, for people to begin to practice trying, because for some people, I mean, right now I'm at 7,500 feet. And as I was hiking this weekend, as my daughter and I were camping, hiking straight up, yes, I was definitely mouth breathing. But for some people, it can just be a habit, right? I mean, it could just be that it's a habit. So is that something that you recommend, or is there something else that you recommend to help people to train to stop mouth breathing while exercising?
Yeah, if you can just remember to try to keep your mouth closed the whole time, go for it. But if you're open to doing a training session with your mouth taped for an hour, you can experiment with it and keep yourself in that kind of like zone 2 type range of cardio, whatever you're doing, so that you're in a place where you're starting to push your limits. You're extending out that like second, third gear range. You're actually making it a stronger, more robust gear. It's almost like you're adding spokes to it in a way, or adding whatever little teeth to the sprockets, which people understand. That's fine. But you're expanding that gear metabolically by challenging and pushing yourself. How much can I push myself while I'm still respirating through my nose? And something to be aware of, if you are breathing through your mouth, you're actually becoming significantly less efficient with the way that you're oxygenating your muscles. And so as you're breathing through your nose, it's passing through this elaborate labyrinth of turbinates that is releasing nitric oxide through your bloodstream. It's like 16 times more nitric oxide production through nose breathing compared to mouth breathing.
Now, you are the first person that I've heard mention that. That's an interesting fact.
It's a big deal. Yeah. If you want to increase nitric oxide production, especially, you could try humming as well. And that helps to liberate some of that nitric oxide. Yeah. And so as you're going through that, you are cooling the air. You're like
while you're exercising, or just humming in general?
Just humming in general. Okay. Yeah, while you're taking a walk.
Well, I mean, that also like helps with your parasympathetic too.
And it helps with parasympathetic. Yes. This is the Align method. So this is like, you're always tuning yourself. You're always training. You're always activating. You do not need to be in a gym. So when we see
you in the grocery store in Austin and you're humming, we know what you're doing now.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Or I'm...
As you're dancing in the line and humming.
Yeah, do that. Okay. Yeah. Or if spend a little bit of time in a deep squat. It seems wild to do such a thing in Western culture, but if you look at, we'll get back to the nose breathing and stay on track, but if you look at cultures that spend time on the ground, they have minimal to no instance of osteoarthritis occur in the hips and the knees. They have like pelvic floor dysfunction is like not so much of a thing. Fall risk is the number one leading reason for elderly needing assisted living. I've fallen and I can't get up off of the ground. That is absolutely a product of atrophy, and it's modernity walking itself off of a cliff. It has nothing to do with being a human. There's no association like, oh, that's just aging. If you go to a culture that gets up and down off of the ground with regularity, because that's just the nature of their environment, they sit on the ground, go to Japan, go to different places where that's go to India, places where it's like, of course, I'm on the ground throughout the day. You never lose that. And every time you're doing that, like right now, it doesn't look like it, but I'm sitting on the ground. So I'm in like a cross-legged position. So I'm mobilizing. My right femur is in external rotation. My left femur, both are actually external rotation. I might go into a 90-90 position. So then my right femur will be in internal rotation. I'm opening, expanding all those beautiful pelvic floor muscles. I'm stacking. My hips are raised up above the height of my knees. So that stacks the pelvic floor and the lower back in relation to the diaphragm. So now I'm creating this like nice safe cylinder that my nervous system can stack itself on. So now I can access full respiration. If I'm able to get a full exhalation, full inhalation, I'm taking my nervous system through that full parasympathetic, sympathetic, parasympathetic, sympathetic. Every time you breathe in, you're more sympathetic. Heart rate speeds up. It actually decreases pressure in and around the heart. So as the diaphragm goes down, all those blood vessels are expanding, and then the heart rate actually increases to be able to move that blood. That's a signal for that sympathetic nervous system. Okay, we got to go. Push in a little bit more blood. You'll feel your heart rate increase. And then when you exhale, if you want to really calm down, have a sigh or maybe a hum. Now suddenly your heart rate goes into slowing down its pace, and everything starts to kind of go more into that. Like, okay, let's rest, digest, heal a little bit. And then you breathe in. Okay, speed it up a little bit. That cycle, that's life. And if you can be in that, that's HRV. And if you can do that, then the body responds better to everything.
And are you doing both your inhalation and your exhalation through the nose?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So
some people, say to breathe in through the nose, hold it
out through the mouth.
Then out through the mouth.
That's fine. Yeah. If you want to like sigh, all that would be pretty much semantics. Like breathing out through the mouth could be nice if you're sighing. If you're actually trying to leverage it as like a kind of physiological tool, sighing is really valuable. But as far as exhaling through the nose and exhaling through the mouth, it doesn't matter that much. The big thing is that you want to make sure you are taking advantage of those 30 plus functions that your nose engages with every time you breathe in air. Your nose is preparing the air for your lungs and the rest of your body every time you breathe. Think of that. It's like passing through the processing plant. And when you pass it to the mouth, you bail on the processing plant, and you're missing a lot of the advantages that you would get from nose breathing. It's very simple.
One of the key methods of the Align method is breathing and breathing through your nose. That sounds to be sort of one of the core principles.
Yeah. And understanding breathing mechanics, so understanding how to use breath for not just calming your nervous system down, which most people could use, but also using it for getting strong. And so the getting strong part would be understanding proper pressure dynamics. So how to create intraabdominal pressure in your midsection when you are lifting something or punching or kicking or anything of the sort. And the way that you do that is through, again, like aligning the joints, creating joint neutrality or balance, or centration is a fancy word for it. But the joints need to stack on top of each other.
Most people probably don't know when their joints are in alignment or not.
Yeah.
So, short of working with you personally, are there some tips that you can give people
For sure.
to?
So something that you could do for starting points, just like basic, obviously. So I have books and programs and different specific exercises that would be really not that interesting for me to like try to explain the specific ones. But the big thing, like starting
Here's
point.
your book for listeners.
Oh yeah, there it is. Yeah. So a great starting point would just be creating traction or decompression throughout the joints. So when in doubt, traction, decompression, create some space, because that's going to, for the least, allow new fluid to be able to perforate all the connective tissue and the joints and the muscles and the tendons and all of that. When things start to get compressed and stuck down onto each other, then it starts to become dehydrated. And if the connective tissue becomes dehydrated, it's also going to become agglomerated, which means like glued together. So those connective tissues that did want to slide atop of each other through that slippery, slimy connective tissue layer called fascia, they will start to bind. And now you're not able to your body actually starts to be limited in its access to range of motion. And so that could look like just moving kind of stiff, healing stiff in your body, not being able to get your arms up over your head, not being able to, stretch out your hips or any of that, because through our repetitive stress injuries, i.e. just sitting around all day, it's like a repetitive stress injury for the body.
Sitting around all day in a chair, maybe not on the ground.
If you're sitting around all day on the ground, or generally like going in and out of ground sitting positions, then you're continually mobilizing and rehydrating yourself. It's beautiful. It's what humans have been built and structured to do since the beginning of humanness. We come from the ground.
And are you on a pillow, or are you just on the ground?
Yeah.
Okay. Like a meditation pillow, or?
Yeah. Yeah. Right now I'm sitting on this guy. Yeah. So it's just a big black, beanbag thing. I think they use like buckwheat or whatever they use.
Basically a meditation.
Spiritual pillows. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But all that matters is that you're lifting your hips up above the height of your ears. As far as like takeaways, because I think I've been maybe meandering through like a lot of words in this conversation. Takeaways for people: spend some amount of time each day, maybe call it 30 minutes or so, just redeveloping a relationship to the ground. If you do that, that is going to be, it's like a panacea. It's like a shotgun of health and vitality for your hips, for your knees, for your ankles, for your pelvic floor. If you don't want to arrive at a point where, incontinence becomes an issue for you, the adult diaper industry I believe it was said to exceed. I think it's exceeded that of the baby diaper industry. Again, not a human thing.
Really?
Not a human thing. Yeah.
Wow.
So that's
impressive.
So that's big business. Human beings coming to a point where we're so atrophied and biomechanically dysfunctional that we can't actually do the most basic of things: get up off of the ground and maintain our bowels and our pee.
So, the average person's going to listen to this interview, and I'm imagining trying to spend more time on the ground. I always like to learn from interviews. I have a pillow very similar to that for meditation. So, how have you personally? You are here doing an interview, so you've clearly made some desk that's at ground height, as opposed to many of us that have these standing desks.
This is a sit-rise desk. It's called from a company called Appeal. It goes all the way to the ground and all the way to standing. Okay,
cool. That's good. And how else have you incorporated this into your life? I mean, do you work while you're clearly doing a podcast while you're doing that? Do you work while sitting as well?
It doesn't need to be weird.
Are you eating while sitting? I mean, how have you realigned your environment to incorporate more sitting?
So I don't want to, because it sounds, if I were to like listen to myself in interviews from like 10 years ago, I feel like I'm like some like prophet of we need to burn chairs. I think that's BS. Like, chairs are fine. Most everything in modernity is fine. It's just how you use it and how often you use it. So sitting in a chair, sitting in an airplane, whatever, is no big deal as long as you're filling your life with other movement rich activities. And so I think it's way more convenient and sustainable if you just start to integrate those methods or practices, which again, if you go to a country that's healthy, these aren't methods or practices, it's just life.
Right. But they're, when you go to a Japanese restaurant, the tables are low.
They're all set up that way.
So all I'm saying is that their entire culture is set up this way. And I don't think there's anything weird about you doing it here in the United States. I'm just wondering how you've set your home or your environment up. Do you have
that's what I do.
Do you have a low table that you're having your meals at a low table?
Yeah. Yeah. So I have like a low kind of coffee table type thing.
Yeah.
And then like a really comfy rug. And then I have different like Moroccan poofs and floor cushions and all that stuff. It's you're more inclined to like snuggle in that situation. You're more inclined to like play, kind of be silly. It's more creative, I think, if you're into making art or making music or anything of the sort. I find also something that's nice about spending time on the ground is it's better for digestion. Because your blood is going to be more focused in your digestive system. So if your legs are all the way down at the bottom of the ground and you're sitting in this position, it's also cutting off circulation through your lymphatic system. So the way that you circulate lymphatic fluid, which I'm confident you already know a lot about, is through movement. So the lymphatic fluid, the largest concentration of lymphatic glands, are in places of perpetual or regular movement. So they're in the back of the knees, they're in the groin, they're in the abdomen, they're up in the neck, they're in the armpit. And the reason for that, I would imagine, like I wasn't a part of the design phase of the human or whatever, but the reason for that is because if you are moving like you would have had to have before we outsourced movement to technology and industry, you naturally would heal yourself and circulate yourself and rid yourself of the waste throughout your body. Because if you're not moving, you're dying. You're like already, you're sick. And so historically forever, you would walk around probably a little bit more. And when you're sitting, you would sit in positions that would actually be advantageous for circulating yourself, circulating that lymphatic fluid. And so when you're sitting and you're kind of hunching over yourself and your knees are bent at 90 degrees and everything is pulling way far away from your heart because you're sitting in a chair all day, you're actually just a way less efficient pumping mechanism. Mm-hmm. You know, and so what that does when you change that up and you bring your legs a little closer to your heart, it allows more blood and circulation to be able to digest your food. Mm-hmm. It's cool.
Yeah. Okay. So I do feel like we have gone in a lot of different directions. So just for our listeners, are there, core principles of the Align method? I don't know if there's, 1, 3, 5. Is there anything that you can kind of lay out for us what these core principles of the Align method are?
The main theme of the Align method, if a person were to read the book or, get any, like we have online program as well, would be teaching a person on how to make it so that fitness is not a thing that you do, but fitness is who you are as a person. So it's teaching a person that the way that you use your visual muscles, because your eyes are continuation of your central nervous system or your brain, that is impacting your physiology. If you're feeling really stressed out, you don't necessarily need to maybe go to a yoga class and do a bunch of Isa breathing things and go through like mantras and chants and whatnot. Maybe just understand that you're training yourself with your visual muscles the way that you use your eyes. Take a break and look out the window, look up at the clouds and use your panoramic vision. The way that you're breathing is a form of fitness. Every breath that you're taking, you're tuning your autonomic nervous system and your blood and your whole physiology. So your visual muscles are fitness. Your breathing muscles are fitness. Your postural muscles, the way that you communicate and move throughout the day, you're always in a place of training yourself. And so that's like the main ethos or philosophy of the Align method is providing a person a user manual on how to make it so that every moment throughout your day is an opportunity to heal your body a little bit more. And the common standards approach to training and fitness is we go to the gym, we work out, go to the yoga studio, do yoga, and then we come back. We don't change hardly anything about our lives. The Align method is all about the life part. So that would be more of like the general ethos of it than like, if you do this, there's specific principles, understanding how to hinge the hips, hanging each day is something that I suggest in there as one of the principles, because it's just another shotgun approach that supports so many different things. So that would be a suggestion as a takeaway. If you just spend a little time on the ground each day and hang off of a bar each day, the total suggestion is 90 seconds. So that could be 15 seconds, 6 times, or 30 seconds, 3 times, or whatever. That's going to start to restructure the shoulder girdle. It's going to put you into a place where instead of having like hunched over postural positions with the shoulders, which is going to affect your lymphatic system, it's going to affect your confidence, it's going to affect so many different things. It starts to open up that space. It opens up the ribs and the intercostal space. It creates a space for your cervical spine, your neck to be aligned to the top of your torso. So that would be something as well that we mentioned there is like an actual thing to do. But more, the Align method is more of a philosophy than a specific, like, do these 3 exercises and you've done the Align method.
And you mentioned the mind-body part as well, or sort of I think you were alluding to our thoughts, having an impact on our body. Can you sort of explain that?
Well, think any time that you've been scared or anxious or angry, it's a physical manifestation that arises, right? So that's like Sir William James is one of the kind of earlier people that popularized those ideas, and his perspective was, I reference him in the Align Method book as well, but his perspective is that we move ourselves into emotions as opposed to emotions moving our body into movement. And I think ultimately it's both. It's not one or the other, it's both. And so as you're communicating to someone, the way that we are actually communicating is a very small percentage of that communication is coming from the words that we're using. And the vast majority of it is coming from the tone of our voice. That's kind of starting to speak to kind of like the older parts of the brain. Facial gestures, facial affect. That's what we're listening to with a person. Body language. All of that sending the signal of this person is safe. I trust them, and tell me more. As soon as your facial affect starts to shift, your eyes get a little shifty, your body language shifts a little bit. Maybe your hips start facing towards the door. Maybe you start kind of getting a little like staticky. It's almost kind of like, is this person anxious? I hear they're saying things, but I'm listening to their body. I'm listening to their tone. And so that would be, and then also within that is you're also communicating how you feel yourself. So if your body language starts to express, I feel anxious, you are anxious, you become anxious. And you have the capacity and the power, if you understand how to regulate and kind of like manage and like wield your body, you have the power to bring yourself back to like choose your state. And so if you want to be more calm, you could open up your shoulders a little. If you want more confident and calm than at ease, open up your shoulders a little bit. You can maybe do a little massage with your traps, maybe do a little massage with your jaw. You could emphasize exhalations. You could relax your eyes. You could intentionally slow down your language. You could do, maybe start whistling, and all of that will literally in real time. You went from, I am freaking out, I don't know what to do, I'm scrambling, I'm flooded, to suddenly you're like, okay, cool. I'm back in my body. I've arrived. And so how that's a relevant thing, I think, is just if a person wants to not be out of control of their state, a really incredibly powerful lever to be able to manage and understand the language of it is the body language.
Since I have a child, they call that, dysregulation, and that, they're not able to, when they get dysregulated and then you get dysregulated, it's a total disaster. So when they get dysregulated, trying to stay cool headed and do things, like I find when my child is, getting angry at me or something, I'll make a silly face, and then it's just hard for her to,
exactly.
Be serious. And, it kind of breaks her from that state, but it's difficult to think rationally, to make decisions, to maybe even move when you're in this, dysregulated, heightened state.
And the fastest way have you ever heard of polyvagal theory? Stephen Porges, his work. I actually have a podcast with Porges coming up here in like a month or so. I'm very excited. But that in polyvagal theory, that the suggestion that he made in that is the fastest way to regulate the nervous system and the vagal system and all the systems is through cooperative play. So if you're in a place where you feel shut down, you're in kind of like that quote unquote like dorsal vagal response, or in sympathetic response or any of that, if you're able, just like you do with your daughter, to suddenly start to engage in almost like this little game with them, it snaps their nervous system out and causes their breath to change. It causes their eyes to change. If we're in that like shocked panic kind of place, you can see it in their eyes. Like think of like a dog. If a dog is dangerous, you can see it in their eyes pretty well, usually, or a person or any of that. And so just that little thing that you do where you kind of just invoke a little smile, or you kind of have like this playfulness thing, you guys are like engaging in a game. You're engaging in cooperative play. And suddenly both of your nervous systems regulate. It's such a powerful tool. Play is like one of those powerful tools a person can really, like, it sounds kind of a little stuffy as like two adults talking about play being a powerful tool to leverage your physiology. If you can forget about all that stuff, you forget about the words, and you just kind of get lost in the experience, and then you're finally freaking happy.
Right.
And so a lot of the stuff, I think we kind of paint ourselves in a corner with trying to understand all the things. Like eventually, ideally, we get to a point where we forget about all this stuff, and we just like go back to being like the human animal for a little bit, and then we can come back to this stuff. But hopefully we forget about this stuff at some point.
Yeah, well, yeah. So if somebody wants to get started with this method where, obviously you have your books, sounds like you have some programs on your website. We'll definitely speak to that at the end. But in general, how does somebody get started?
So there's the 6-week Align Method online program that the first week is free. So they can go through that. There's a movement assessment. And then I share some fundamental self-care techniques and practices in there that are valuable. So that's at alignpodcast.com/AMP, stands for Align Method Program. And then if people have any other questions or anything, they can just reach out on Instagram, favorite place. That's Aaron Alexander. And we have lots of content on YouTube. That's the Align Podcast YouTube channel. It's a podcast called Align Podcast. But a great starting point would be if they want to actually start the free trial of the program and see if that's a fit for them. That's alignpodcast.com/AMP.
Many of my listeners are women, and they're women who have autoimmunity, and some of them may have disabilities because of their autoimmune condition, MS, rheumatoid arthritis, and maybe they feel intimidated just by some of the things that we shared. How can you ease their minds, or, are there things, basically, do you have to be in shape to start to do this, or can anybody do this?
Anybody. Yeah. So I would say if I was suggesting I'm going to teach you how to break dance, or do CrossFit, and be like, okay, there's a certain bar. I was saying, let's learn how to human better. So wherever you're humaning right now, whatever the bar of humaning, there is easy, accessible ways to subtly nudge that bar so that you human a little bit better. That's what we do with the Align Method stuff. And then within that, there are specific exercises and techniques, but everything it's more about joint mobility and traction and spaciousness and ease and alignment of the body, and less about doing, backflips and sprinting really fast. But if you have access to all of those baseline fundamentals of just the body fitting well within itself, then you open up the potential to do really anything you want. But that's the foundation, is first figure out how to align your joints and your connective tissue and keep the systems so that they heal themselves throughout the day just by the way that you live your life. Then build whatever you want on top of that.
And, I find it kind of interesting as we're talking about movement and building muscle and, all of this, we haven't really talked about food at all. Do you have any, specific diet that you follow or that you recommend people who are following your program follow?
I'm actually a breatharian, and I haven't consumed human calories for several months. No, I think that I kind of stay out of that conversation. I have strong opinions for myself and people that are close to me. And if people ask questions in a more intimate container, I have a lot to say. But it's not something that I feel like I have enough depth as a practitioner and an expert for me to really care for people to listen to my perspectives on food. But since you're asking, my 2 cents would be, and hopefully, I don't care if people want this stuff, but generally just it's more about it's what are you not eating, I think. So if you remove some of the what I would consider BS from your diet, and that would be mostly things that you just don't know how to pronounce them, what they are, high fructose corn syrup, things are manufactured someplace that your body just isn't going to be able to recognize that as information. It's like you're providing your body a book and it's written in another language. Remove that, all of it, just get rid of it, and then bring in information, i.e. food, that your body would recognize that's locally sourced if you have access to that, and is that would be a really important thing. Like understanding the sourcing of your food, whether you're a vegetarian or carnivore or whatever this thing is. I would care more about the sourcing of where do you get your meat, where do you get your vegetables, where do you get your fruit? Is it doused in pesticides and all sorts of issues that are probably spurring different autoimmune conditions and causing your body to be oh my God, attack, defend. So the more that you can be putting food into your body that your body recognizes, I would presume intuitively, the less likely your body would have a defensive response to that stuff. And then I personally eat, if people were care, just based off of okay, well, you're in good shape, Aaron, what do you actually eat? I eat nose to tail. And so it's like largely animal-ish based, but not, not entirely. But I'm not afraid of meat. I'm not afraid of red meat at all. I think it's fantastic. I feel like the best I've had eating a lot of regeneratively farmed meat specifically. So it's all about the source. I really, care about that part of like, what's the impact of the food that I'm eating, that it's having on the rest of the environment and the ecosystem. I eat fruits, I eat, white rice, eat a lot of eggs, eat a lot of fermented foods, which I think I listened to the interview that you're not such a fan of fermented foods.
Well, only when people are dealing with SIBO and Candida. And after they've dealt with SIBO and Candida, then absolutely to rebuild your microbiome. We have pickles and sauerkraut in our refrigerators.
Yeah, I think that a lot of the folks in the kind of like carnivore space where they're saying, plants, they have their defense chemicals because they don't have horns or teeth to defend themselves. I think likely most of those people will concede in the next, couple of years or a few months or whatever. Be like, okay, like plants are fine. It's just the way you prepare the plants. So if you are steaming the plant or fermenting the plant or, there's different processes, pressure cooking the plant, you're probably going to be processing out a lot of those defense chemicals, and it's going to be easier on your digestive system. And there's also the conversation, which I don't have enough depth, so I'm going to really shut up after this, of like, should those defense chemicals be a hermetic stress for the body? I don't know. I'll leave that to like experts.
Yeah, I mean, debate. I think that, I talk about goitrogens in one of my books, The Thyroid Connection. I mean, most people are not eating enough broccoli and of the cruciferous vegetables, right? I mean, for these to be a problem. And so,
exactly.
I mean,
it's like the amount.
Right. And I was a vegetarian for 27 years and started eating meat after I was diagnosed with autoimmunity and went through the functional medicine training. So my books are all very paleo-ish in terms of, while you're on the autoimmune spectrum, if you're high up on the spectrum with autoimmunity, really diving deep and not having any grains. And as you reverse your autoimmunity, I grew up eating brown rice, and now we have no brown rice in our house. We have white rice as well. So, I grew up eating brown rice and tofu almost every day with broccoli. So we do not have brown rice or tofu in our house any longer. So we're very much, I have a big garden and, do our best to get, certainly in our house, pasture raised, grass fed, beef, locally sourced if possible, and, everything organic in our house.
There's an idea that I like of like young people know about things that change and old people know about things that don't change. So there's like the wisdom in an elder. It's like, I know about the things that are going to be pretty much the same for the next 1,000 years. And a young person knows about like TikTok, and like things. It's like, oh, this is going to shift like the algorithm. It's always changing.
Yeah.
And, within that, I think that there's a lot of like newfangled ideas around nutrition and things of the sort that is the thing for 5 years or maybe even a decade or so, and then it changes, and then it changes, and then it changes. Something like the intuitively for me, like the white rice conversation. I'm like, it seems like we've been doing this white rice thing for seems like millennia, and now suddenly white rice is the devil. Like, I'm suspicious. And then sure enough, 10 years later, you're like, oh crap, that was actually really tough on your digestive system.
Right.
So it's, I think, leaning more into like, what would my great grandfather or mother say about this?
Well, I think they were they eating white rice or were they eating brown rice? I actually think they probably were eating more brown rice, but maybe pressure cooking it.
Screw that idea.
Well, I don't know, but in beans, but they were pressure cooking it. I mean, over fires for many. This is sort of off topic, but it reminds me of a story. I was traveling to India. I had donated some money to a organization to build a kitchen at an orphanage named after my mother. And, I was with this group of donors, and I had been in the Peace Corps. So, I've traveled all over, and, in the restaurants and stuff, they're eating up. And then we go out, to this very rural area, and they serve lunch with the orphans. And it's this huge pot of, just beans and rice. And, you just see all the donors just like, oh, I don't want to eat that, right? Like, we're out in the middle of nowhere. And I'm thinking, this is the safest food. This stuff has been boiled for 8 hours. There is nothing still living in that. It was the salad you were eating in New Delhi that you probably could have gotten sick of. There is nothing alive in here. This thing has been cooked over a fire for, like all day long. Anyway, sorry, just digressing, but it was just kind of a funny thing that it was like, this is the safest food we got in this country.
And the other health inducing factor in that is you, by not going and eating a prepackaged Pop-Tart covered in phthalates and different microplastics and all the different things, because you're going to stay safe and secular and alone. Now you're eating alone. Yeah. And you're creating a separation, and like one of the like breaking bread, I think, is like biblical aspects to it. Like the Bible has a lot of smart things to say. So does a lot of the canonical texts, of all different sorts. But like the idea of breaking bread with people, I think there's actually, I know, but I'd be humble and say I think there's a lot of health inducing factors in that's probably really supportive for digestion and supportive for you. Like, I feel safe. I'm in community. I feel in love. I feel in connection. Now suddenly I'm able to engage in peristalsis, and my parasympathetic nervous system is more online, and my breathing is a little bit better, and all my connective tissue and all the sphincters throughout my digestive system, they're a little bit more relaxed because I feel love. Mm-hmm. Compared to, I don't trust, I'm scared, I'm going to go eat my Pop-Tarts alone. Thank you very much.
Yes. Well, I did at the time. I was very much following my, diet and was not eating any grains or beans. Right. And so I brought lots of beef stick with me and beef jerky to the vegetarian country. But of course, I did eat with everyone and ate the beans and rice and whatever it was that we were eating.
I like that. Maybe squirt a little lemon in there.
Yeah, it was perfectly fine. Yeah. Well, before we part ways, is there a success story that you'd like to share, either of yourself following the Align method or anyone that you've worked with that's given you permission to, share a success story?
Probably the most like one that's the most like relevant is the Rodgers thing. That was like last year. Was working with him, training preseason. He just transitioned to the Jets. And was going through and working on some of these like different, more like rotational type movement patterns and working on gait running and all that stuff. And then he ended up having this catastrophic injury of rupturing his Achilles tendon, and then that shifted into just full like all hands on deck effort on connective tissue regeneration. Like, how do we get this thing to regenerate as fast as humanly possible? And that ended up being the most iconic healing story in the history of sports in a lot of ways, at least in relation to Achilles ruptures. So that was like an impossible thing that he did, being able to come to a point within the same season and actually be available to play by the end of the season. And so a big part of that was not just doing, like we had like hundreds of thousands of dollars of tech that we were using and different things, but it wasn't just that stuff. It was really incorporating the really simple, easy, accessible to anybody fundamental principles from the Align method. So it was things like we've shared, and also incorporating like nature into your day, like sunlight, circadian rhythm, incorporating some basic lifestyle adjustments throughout your day so your body becomes a healing system more hours of the day, as opposed to a system that's kind of backing up on itself. So that would be probably the most recent relevant one.
And I always like to ask our guests, or my guests, what are 3 ways you would encourage our listeners to take back their health?
Oh, go outside as much as possible. Spend as much of your life outside. That's the most important thing by far.
That's hard to do when it's 120 degrees in Austin.
Deal with it. Yeah, because you're getting stronger. So it's only hard for you because you don't do it. So if you're accustomed.
I'm joking, but the weather here is much better than in Austin.
No, I know. But that, like, that's like, it's a person is kind of, think of the way that you relate to, I don't know, like thermogenesis, or cooling your body, heating your body, like being able to thermoregulate yourself. Think of that as a form of fitness, because it's 100% a form of fitness.
Well, I get in my infrared sauna and it's well over 120 degrees, but you don't have the humidity in there that you have in Austin.
Yeah. So if you're a person, like, it's like so much is about perspective. And so if you have the perspective that I go outside and it's like, oh, it's too cold, or oh, it's too hot, or oh, it's too humid, it's fine. But maybe just engage in a little bit of exposure therapy and just push your boundaries a little bit. And what you'll find is, just like after you do any workout, you'll be happier. Your body releases a whole cornucopia of different hormones and neurochemicals and things of the sort to make you feel better every time you do something a little bit hard. When you become too comfortable, you generally go in the direction of feeling a little bit more like depressed. Not necessarily clinical depression, but like depressed is like brought down. So it's like life is this cycle, just like parasympathetic, sympathetic, of exposing yourself to things that feel kind of uncomfortable and hard, and then reprieve and relax. So I would say like embrace the elements, go outside. If it's a little bit cold outside, maybe go out in a t-shirt and see how that feels. Disregard the concept of you're going to go catch a cold. You'll catch a cold if your immune system is downregulated from all of the different crap that you're doing or not doing. But exposing yourself to a little bit of cold temperature is actually going to boost your immune system because it's going to send a signal to your body that you need to be strong. So that would be something.
Go outside.
Go outside. Open your heart. You're not going to be happy, or like none of the crap that you're eating, the exercises that you're doing or whatever matter if you are closed down to giving and receiving love in your daily life. So whatever you are afraid of, to actually be emotionally vulnerable and connected and speak your mind and be honest with yourself and communicate truth. Release any lies that you have within yourself. If you're holding on to any lies, any BS, any parts of like duplicitousness, two-facedness, a mask that you're wearing. That mask that you wear is actually a weight that you hold, and it causes your nervous system and your physiology and everything to get like bogged down. So the more that you can come into a place of being honest and authentic, and even if it's something that feels shameful or more scary to say, you can come to a place where you actually can share that and surround yourself with people that can accept you for that. I think that's going to be one of the greatest things you can possibly do. And then the last thing I would say is probably, I don't know. I think that's enough. Open your heart and go outside.
I thought you certainly thought you were going to say breathe or breathe through your nose.
Yeah, well, breathing will happen. You open your heart, you'll breathe better.
Okay.
But then also if you breathe better, you open your heart. So I would say bring your awareness back into your breath would be one, and just be playful. Like, this is a dream, everybody. Like we're like, we don't know what we're doing here. If you really take yourself that seriously, you're just holding a weight that's bringing yourself down and everybody around you. You're becoming like this black hole. It's a pulling energy. Like, lighten yourself up a little bit. The reason that angels can fly is because they take themselves lightly.
And you've mentioned it previously, but can you do it again? And we'll put it in the show notes where people can find you, please.
Yeah. If they have any questions, they can reach out to just Aaron Alexander. It's on Instagram. That'd probably be a likely one. They wanted to start the free trial of the 6-week program. That's alignpodcast.com/AMP. And then we also have a breathing specific program coming out in about a month and a half. So if you're interested in understanding structure, function, mechanics of how to breathe better, it's one of the most important things you could possibly do. For now, you can reach out to me on Instagram if you want to learn to breathe. I can send you the links for that.
Awesome. Great. Yeah. Well, so good to meet you. And thanks so much for spending some time with us. And
yeah, it was so fun.
Yeah. Hopefully I'll get to meet you in Austin sometime.
I would love that.
I want to thank this week's guests for sharing their time and knowledge. And thank you for listening. To read the full show notes for each episode, which include a summary, timestamp, quotes, and any resources mentioned, please visit amymyersmd.com/podcast. Lastly, if you've enjoyed this episode, I'd love if you would leave a rating and a review on Apple or Spotify, and we'll select a few to read out loud in a future episode. Tune in next week to hear from another inspiring guest as we help you take back your health.